Okay, everybody, today we are going to do the carving demo. There are three important things you need to remember when carving your block. These rules are in rank order, and the first is don't carve towards your hand. The second rule is that the recessed areas of the block must slope up to the raised printable area. The third thing you need to remember when carving your block is after you're done, you need to sand the block. So these are the three things in rank order. 1, don't carve towards your hand. 2, the recessed areas must slope up to the raised areas. And 3, sand your block when you're done carving. Now we're going to look at carving your block without carving towards your hand. There are 5 tools that the Japanese traditionally use to carve woodblock prints. Okay, we have the V gouge. Well, this is not. Oops. Woo. Okay. The most important tool when carving in the traditional Japanese way is this hangito blade right here, the hangito. And it is a blade where one, it is completely flat. And then when you flip it to the side, you'll notice an angle that slopes downwards on the very tip, right? And then when we turn it to the side, you're going to see that angle. Okay, now, don't carve towards your hand. When I show you this blade is kind of the exception to that rule. I love how the first rule out of the gate I'm breaking. Because traditionally you hold the hangito like so, or you can hold it like a dagger or a Atari joystick, if you're my generation, or you can hold it like a pencil as well if that's a little bit more comfortable. If you hold it like a pencil, the knife won't cut as deep, but it will feel more comfortable. And I recommend holding it like this until you get a good handle on using this knife. Handle, that's a good pun. But the important thing is that when you carve with the hangito, that this sloped area right here is facing towards the shape that will print. I've divided my block here into 4 sections for the purposes of this demo. This is the V gouge, this is the U gouge, this is the chisel, and then this is the hangito. I'm going to cut out this shape using the hangito. And so all this area is going to be cleared. Now, when I'm first starting out, I'm going to take this and I'm going to push down with this angled part pointing towards this shape that will print. And I'm going to position it and I'm just going to carve like so. Pardon my head. Okay, and when I come to a curve like this, it's important to stop and adjust your block because if you carve like a serpentine, this blade is going to snap. So I'm adjusting the block and I'm going to carve more. Where did it go? There we go. Okay, so this line is scored and you can barely see it when I hold the block, right? You can kind of make out that scored line right here. This line will not print, and we'll talk about why that can be useful later, but it's important to remember that this line is not going to print. So I've did the outside with, and now I'm going to do this inside circle. And I'm going to make sure that this angle right here is pointing towards this shape with the lines in it. There. So I have scored both sides of this line with the hangito. The Japanese consider this scoring knife to be the most important knife when you're carving woodblock prints. That's because with the hangito, you can get all these super curvy lines that make the print look like an ink drawing rather than an actual print. So if you want your prints to have very flowy, organic lines, then I think mastering the hangito is something that's going to be really important for you. Now we're going to move on to the U-gouge, right? You're going to be pretty familiar with this. And the U-gouge has a scoop. When I turn it to the side, you can see the angle of the scoop. And then when I turn it, right, that's what it looks like on the bottom. So we have two U-gouges in this set. I have a small one and a large one. The way I use the U-gouge, and this is important, this is where we don't carve towards our hand, is I brace it holding the U-gouge with my steering hand. I call this my steering hand. It's my right hand, it's my good hand. And I like to think of it as my steering hand with this knife. Kind of like I'm driving the car. If the left hand, or if my right hand is my steering hand, the left hand is going to be my accelerating hand, the one that pushes the knife forward, that drives the knife forward. So I'm going to position the knife at about a 45-degree angle. It's actually the same angle as this, slope, so you can kind of feel it out. That's how you know if your angle is right. I'm going to push with my thumb and steer with my hand. So this controls the movement. This controls the force. And I am bracing the block. I am holding the block down with my fingers. So I'm not using a cutting mat. I'm not using a non-stick mat for this. You don't need one. I'm just using a cutting mat here. So I'm bracing it. I'm pushing down with, you don't have to push down so your fingers are red. I'm just doing that to show you, but bracing with my fingers and pushing. I'm pushing with my thumb. So my entire hand is kind of acting like a rig or a jig for this knife. Here's the larger one. Okay. Okay, so going back to this shape here that I'm going to cut out, I have scored it on both sides of the hangito, and now I'm going to clear the wasteful area away, this area. So here we go. I'm just going to start carving straight up. But if I want to turn, I can turn my block while pushing forward. So this knife should always be pointing away from your body. Always be pointing away from your body. Okay, there's never an excuse not to have these knives pointing away from your body, because as you can see, I'm just adjusting as I carve, and you'll get the hang of it. It may feel a little awkward at first, but this is the way to do it. As I carve, I'm carving like a few millimeters, like half a millimeter away from my scored line. I'm not carving against the scored line. If you do that, you could rupture the score. Now I'm going to carve this little outside area around half a millimeter. And come around here, half a millimeter. And now I'm going to switch to this other U-gouge, which is a larger shape. And I'm going to continue to carve around. Like so. As you carve your block, you're going to have to start thinking about printing the block, okay? This is where the steps start to merge a little bit. As you carve, I am not going to carve away this whole square, okay? In fact, I'm only carving about a few millimeters. This is 1 millimeter, okay? Or yeah, like it's a centimeter. Not millimeter. It's 1 centimeter. That's really all this 1 or 2 centimeters at the most is all you really need because you're going to be inking selectively with this stenciling brush. I am pushing up away from my body as I clear out this center area. Also just going around in a circle like I did before. That's the U gouge. And you're going to use the V gouge the same way. The V gouge is essentially a Western invention, and it is two versions of the hangito just in a V shape, right? So just like this. So this side is one side of the hangito. And you may be thinking, okay, well, if this V gouge is the same size, there's the same type of knife as the hangito, but it's two of them combined, then why even use the hangito? The hangito gives you much more control when it comes to precise lines. So this is the V gouge, and again, I'm using it just like the U gouges, where I brace, pull back out. There we go. I brace with my hand, and then I push like so. So for here, I'm not really, you know what? I will use the V gouge. I'll use it right here. So I'm just gonna boop. The next tool we're going to cover is this chisel tool. It is a flattening knife. The top is flat, and when you spin it over, it is very much like a traditional chisel shape with this one little angle, right, pointing up. And so this knife has several uses. The first use is to clear away waste up to the scored line. So if we return to our shape here that I'm going to carve out, this chiseling knife is going to carve away this space right here, right? All of this area where the waist meets our scored line from the hangito. And when you use this leveling knife, you do not want to use it up against the scored line. You want to be like 1/4 of a millimeter. And as you can see, as soon as I start pushing, the wood that leads up to that scored line is just popping off, right? And my knife isn't even touching the scored line. It's like 1/2 millimeter away from it. You see that? And it just brushes right off. And what happens is it makes a perfect curve. This scored line is perfect. These three knives work together. These three types of knives, the leveling knife, the hangito, and the U gouge, they work together in a very specific step-by-step basis to create these lovely, organic, flowing lines unique to Japanese prints. I am not pushing against the scored line. When I clear away that waste, my knife is like right here. The first rule, or the first use for this knife, is clearing away the waste. All right, so you can actually see here, I'm just gonna lightly, there you go. All right, so if you look at this wood chip, you can see that perfectly scored line right here, right? There it is, just popped right off. All right, here it is again. Perfectly scored line. And there it is. Excellent. The second use is to flatten out all of these areas here. As you're inking your block, these little areas here, these little raised areas, are going to capture and hold ink. And it can really gunk up your block in the printing process. So it's important that we flatten them out. If your recessed areas are flat, then there's nowhere for that ink to go or stick to. So it's going to stay to it's going to stick to the raised areas only. So all these little grooves, you want to flatten out so ink cannot get under there. So you're just going to flatten it out like this, right? And all these guys in here, I'm flattening them out so they're nice and flat. And you may even see like little areas like this, right? Those are going to hold ink, those little jaggy areas. So you just want to flatten out those two. And, you know, I really love this part of the carving process. I find it really relaxing just to like move this chisel back and forth and watch those areas flatten out. The third use for this knife is to create a slope, all right, between the wasteful area and the raised area. So the recessed and the raised area. So holding it at kind of an angle, I'm just going to smooth the block out, all right? Or smooth out these raised and lower areas. Not on the hangito because our scored line provides that slope. This is for the recessed areas and the uninked areas. So only for this space around the other side of the recessed area. Clear out the space between the V gouge or the U gouge and the scored line so you can get that perfect curvy linear shape. The second use is to flatten out the areas that are recessed so they are nice and smooth so ink won't hold there. And then the third use is to not create a nice little slope between the uninked area and the waste area. What I've just shown you is the traditional way you carve a woodblock print. So when you look at 19th century prints like the Great Wave off Kanagawa, the ones I showed you in the examples, this is how they go about carving them, that clear step-by-step process.